hope to make these sessions as two-way as we can, but I understand that there's a lot of us here this morning. So yeah, if you can, quick bit of housekeeping, if you can just pop yourself on mute if you're not talking. We're not expecting a fire drill, but I am working from home, and if the postman comes, I'm sure my dog will let you all know. So yeah, we've got the open chat function, so any questions, just pop them in there as we go along. So in regards to participation in the trust, we've got several groups that are on the slide in front of you, so I won't run through them with you. So the junior CICC and the CICC for children with disabilities are new. They began in January of this year. We do have age limits onto the groups, but what we do is we allow a transition period, so that 3 months before a young person's birthday and after a young person's birthday, so 6 months in all, they can attend both groups, because we don't want people to we don't want to lose people as we move from age group to age group. So during COVID, we kept all our groups going. As I say, we've got a couple of new ones, and we moved our groups online. And we did lose some members. That when Kate was talking earlier, she was talking about the difficulty that some people had with technology. So we did lose some members, but we also gained others, particularly from those that are based out of city that we wouldn't normally have been able to engage with. So at the minute, we're holding regular face-to-face meetings every 3 to 4 weeks. But what we can do is that we can top those up with Teams or Zoom meetings outside of this. So we had Ofsted in last week, and what we were able to do was, instead of pulling all the young people in for a run through for a discussion about that beforehand, we did it on Teams, and then they turned up in person to speak to Ofsted. So pros and cons to it as far as we've found. So yes, it's all in the team. So running a team of rights and participation workers is for me at times a bit like herding cats, or as it shows there, being in Fraggle Rock. So we have a whole range of backgrounds and experiences within our team. So we've got workers from education, from mental health backgrounds, from youth services, from social workers, as myself, and everyone has a different way of thinking and doing. But we recruit fundamentally based on people's value bases. So what we've decided is, we can teach people the law, we can teach people the stat guidance and the practice regs, but our team is made up of people who believe that children should be listened to and their rights upheld all the time with no excuses. Now that does mean that I'm managing a team of quite strong individuals. But I find they're very respectful of each other, even though they work quite differently, and we have a good learning ethos through the team, which is really useful, because we don't just challenge statutory social work decisions, we challenge education decisions, health decisions. So by having such a broad team that really keen on learning from each other, we can generally manage anything that comes up. So I know we've got a variety of people here. Could you just kind of stick your hand up, if either virtually or otherwise, if you've got if you know about participation, or if you work in that area, if we're able to do that. Let me just click on a different. Okay, so we've got a few people. What I'll do then is I'll just run through fairly quickly kind of the whole participation thing, really. So participation is often depicted as a ladder, although it pops into my mind as being a sliding scale. So there are several slightly different models created by people far more intellectual than I am. But the important point is that participation depends on sharing your power and sharing your control as a professional. So if you share a lot of this, you're going to be at the top of the ladder. If you keep it to yourself, you're further down the bottom. So what does that look like in reality? So if I run through some examples of kind of the things and the requests that we've done recently. So we were asked to work with the disabled children's team on their service improvement project, which they called Children First, which is a fairly good indication of kind of how inclusive they wanted to be of young people. So children and young people with disabilities and additional needs put together a questionnaire to go out to all the children with disabilities within the trust. So we had sessions with young people, and they decided the core content of what they wanted to put into that. So they talked about kind of if they were going to be talking, what would they most want to tell the adults about. So they decided that core content. They designed the types of questions, they worded the questions, as well as doing the introductions and the promotional stuff for that questionnaire. So the work took 4 2-hour sessions, as well as some one-to-one time. And the service redesign timescale was extended to allow us to do that work. They pushed that back, they changed the timescales for it. And I think that's really important to remember, is that young people work with their own timescales. They don't necessarily work within our timescales. Things can take longer, they can be more complicated, you'll go off on tangents. So if you need to be able to have the scope to be able to do that within the young person's timescales. Another really good example was previously our Care Leavers Forum worked really closely on the Care Leavers offer, which is a statutory offer that local authorities have to give for children who have left care. Again, it was a great piece of ground up work, but it took probably at least 40 hours in total to put together that piece of that Care Leavers offer. And then on the other extreme, particularly if you think in the run up to Ofsted, you know, we've been approached to say, well, could you just provide young people's comments for a young people's guide, which when they haven't seen the whole document. And for instance, could they decide the wall colour in the lounge of a new young people's residential home without having any input into kind of what the layout of the home or what else should be in the home. So we have to have that balance of kind of tokenism. And it does seem that recently everybody wants to be able to include young people's comments and opinions and be able to sign their work off as co-produced. And I think that's why it sticks in my head as being a sliding scale. So the sticky area of compromise. So I work for the local authority. The local authority I work for is the largest statutory provider of children's services in Europe. So we've got 2,000 children in care, over 900 care leavers. So my Director of Children's Services is a very important person, as is my Director of Practice. So I'm very lucky my Director of Practice is a huge advocate for children's voices and the work we do. But I must say, she is just a little bit scary in that kind of head teacher kind of way. So we work within this system. And then beyond those two individuals, there are a myriad of other directors. We've got assistant directors, heads of service, all of whom are kind of far higher up that chain of command than I am. So when I get requests to kind of, can you just pop something together, or you just ask the young person what they think of this one, there are sometimes some quite difficult conversations, and it's about understanding what that professional is after, what they're looking for, and explaining kind of as this diagram shows, kind of the whole model of participation, and kind of trying to find some compromise and some middle ground for that. And perhaps, you know, it's a little bit of a grey area, and down to some personal compromise and some personal conscience, perhaps. So the way that we work is our groups identify their own campaigns. Sometimes, particularly for our younger groups or our new groups, we discuss with them the themes that come through our advocacy, which is why it's so useful to have our advocacy in-house as well. So we'll talk about what's come up with them, and they'll link it to their own personal experiences. And kind of come up with their new campaigns. We also do service improvement work for the trust. We do a lot of recruiting. So we've got trained young people. It was so we interviewed for the new AYSE social workers this year, and we'll do that again next February. So we ran a training course to get young people more confident and to understand what it is to be on a young people's panel. And I always remember one young person said, we thought it was going to be a quick half an hour, quick whiz through, and it was an hour and a half with the young people, which was brilliant. And I knew the tone of the session was going to be, because the one young person about 5 minutes in said, hang on a minute, we interview social workers. Oh, yeah, they all get interviews. And he was like, well, if we interview them, why are they so bad? So we're really pushing that young people getting involved right at the beginning of the recruitment and from the very senior posts, so that over a longer period of time we can improve that value base that sits within the trust. So our young people and our team do training internally and externally. And we've got regular seats on the corporate parenting board, which meets quarterly. Okay, so why does it work? So I love this quote from Dr. Seuss. So kids, you'll move mountains. You're off to great places. Today is your day. Your mountain is waiting. So we work with loads of superb social workers and practitioners who identify what needs to change and try really hard themselves to challenge and escalate that. When I was a social worker, I experienced the pain of repeatedly banging my head against the wall and not getting anywhere. And yet our young people, are so powerful. So our young people are generally polite and respectful. We don't tend to have a great deal of difficulty with that, and that's one of the reasons why it works, because of who they are and how they present themselves. And I'm sure, as plenty of you here will know, young people communicate with honesty and with emotion. They describe their own reality and what it feels like to live the life that they are or have lived. It's powerful with a capital P. Our young people can move mountains in a way that we can only dream of. Now, I have an alternative title for this slide, which is How to Stop People Arguing Back. What we've seen is hearing raw, personal, upsetting experiences from young people is tough. You know, when you've got a young person in front of you saying, this is what happened, and this is how I experienced it, and this is how it made me feel. It is tough, and people can automatically become defensive. They start thinking about how they're going to push back against that. And that's particularly if the environment is with other professionals around them. So if you think of our corporate parenting boards, where we've got our council members, we've got the senior members of the trust and all of the other organisations, and here's a young person saying that actually you haven't done well enough, and this is the impact of this. So it kind of, and we have to work a way of kind of managing that response that we get. So one way we found to counter this kickback that we get is to make sure that what the young person is sharing in that particular situation is recent and relevant. So Care Leavers made a huge progress speaking at the Corporate Parenting Board just last month about improvements needed in mental health services. Now, historically, for the last 2 years, our young people have refused to talk about mental health services because they saw themselves sharing their experiences with not having any change. So there's a lot of emotion that sits there. So we had a whole forum discussion where everyone shared their own experiences. There was some good, some bad, some frankly quite scary. And this gave us the underlying themes of what needed to change. But the two individuals that came to the board to share had experiences that were recent and relevant. So that's not to say that the other people's experiences were any less important, only that by being particular about who spoke at the presentation, it became less likely that they will be challenged, because historically what we've had is people saying things like, oh, well, you know, that was 2 years ago, we don't do anything like that anymore, or not specific enough. So they'll say you're talking about GP care and not secondary mental health services, or we have a leaflet for that, or that only happened at the beginning of COVID. So by having a group that shares their and gets the themes, and then having young people that are sharing experience which is recent and relevant. Now, I'm conscious I've spoken a lot at you, and this was meant to be a presentation which included our young people's work and what they want to tell you about. So we'll move on to that now. So we've been running the Children in Care Council's Mind Your Language campaign, started about 3 to 4 years ago, with the idea of having a thesaurus for professionals to use when talking about children, when talking to children. Simple, brilliant. So we put the idea to them and we started the conversation. And it remains one of the most emotional and revealing sessions I've been a part of. We had tears, we had anger, we had frustration, the full range, and it gave us a clear indication, if we didn't know beforehand, about the power of language and the impact it has. Each word meant different things and had a different emotion to each child. And this piece that I'm going to show you is a good example of that. So this is a clip from Harley. It was self-filmed during lockdown for an online workshop we did for research in practice. So apologies for the quality. If someone could just let me know if you can hear this.
Hi, I'm Harley. I used to be part of the Children in Care Council, but then I got a bit too old. But I was part of the Children in Care Council for almost 11 years. So, you're talking about mind your language stuff. Well, this is how I see it. Birmingham wanted to rename contact to family time, as contact is more formal. For me, I never enjoyed contact. I really disliked what my parents had done to me and the reason I was in care. To me, contact was totally appropriate. It was formal and something I had to do and something I didn't enjoy. There was no family time involved. For my younger sisters, it may have been different, and that is them. This is me. See where I'm going with this? So ask yourselves, all the language, all the political correctnesses, what is it for? Is it for young people, or is it for the professionals, so they can feel good about using snappy phrases? Thank you.
So we've had some really good outcomes from our Mind Your Language campaign. So we started small, and we built on each little win that we had. So the first thing that the young people wanted to challenge was changing the word lack, so looked after children, to change it to CIC, so children in care. And by picking something that was relatively straightforward and easy. So no one's going to argue that children in care should be called lacking. That nobody's, it's very difficult to stand up and argue with that. So once we started that momentum and had those little wins, it was then easier to build up and start challenging kind of the words individually and how they affected each young person individually. So we've managed to change not just the spoken words in the trust, but also with partners, mainly through the kind of simple and respectful use of challenge. So you're in a meeting, somebody, child in care review, somebody calls a child in care lack, and just being able to go, if you don't mind, our young people have told us that they prefer being referred to as children in care because they don't think they're lacking. And once you say that, it's fairly obvious and quite difficult to argue with. So we build on those, starting small, build on those little wins up to more complicated stuff like, actually, can you just ask the young person what words they'd like to use? And that's used regularly now in education and health and in all documents and recordings in the trust. So the other thing that our young people raised was the point of understanding. So we've increased the use of video in the last 18 months during lockdown. So before we used to have take a group of young people to somewhere and they do the training in person themselves. But we've increased the use of video, both directly from the young people talking about their own experience, like we just saw with Harley, but also to produce, I suppose, what you would call made up videos, which are based on the shared experiences and themes that the young people are sharing. So they share their themes, they put together a script, but it's not one young person own personal experience. So young people talk about the use of language, so not just spoken words, but the clarity of what's being said. So they ask questions like, whose responsibility is it to understand? Is it the responsibility of the talker or the listener? Can you understand street talk? Should you be able to? And what do you do if you don't understand? I'm just going to apologise to our BSL interpreter for this one, because I don't have a transcript for it, because I just want people to be able to engage with it. So this is a clip from a training session, which was to encourage discussion on that particular point of understanding. So again, it's a shorter clip out of a longer piece. So the setting is that a young person is missing from home. They're trying to find out what's going on, and the question to attendees off the back of this was, what's happened and why isn't he going home? So if you listen to this, and then hopefully we can have a bit of discussion about what you think is going on.
Nah, okay, listen, yeah. I told social, now I'm telling you the exact same thing, innit? I'm sweating here, I'm shook, proper. That last Tuesday it happened, so I'm chilling with the brethren, and then Cyrus come. I don't know what was going on. He was running, sweating, must have been mad or something. Who knows? Then he just had a zoot in it, and he shoved it in my jacket pocket. Then after he shoved it in my jacket pocket, yeah, he legged it. He was gone. Couldn't see him. Turn around. I'm just thinking, yo, bro, we got a zoot in it. So it's Christmas. Man's gonna get, whoa. So I was stoked, and it was banging. You know, next day Cyrus come, and he was just like, well, where my zoot at? And I was just like, yo, fam, allow it. And then he was just like, nah, fam, nah. It's like, obviously I want my zoot. And then he was talking about backing out. He was backing out some tonks and tools and things. And then obviously, yeah, I got shook, so I ain't been back on since.
Okay, so apologies, that's caught just a tad short. So the young person hasn't been home since. Can we just kind of get some feedback from people about what people thought was going on there? Apologies, I can't see people's hands at this point, so.
I think he saw his friend, and the friend put a joint in his pocket, and he was really pleased. The friend left then, so he was pleased, smoked the joint, and then the next day he saw his mate again, and the mate was annoyed that he'd smoked it, got angry with him, and then he didn't feel like he could go home because of that.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Thank you. Exactly it. And has anyone got any thoughts kind of around whose responsibility? Because obviously I work in Birmingham. We're hugely multicultural. We've got lots of people with different languages and accents, and then, like you say, people with additional needs. Has anyone got anything they want to share around kind of how we whose responsibility it is to understand, and what we can do about that? Again, apologies, I can't see people's hands up at this point. No, okay, I'll leave you guys to think about that one then. So moving on. So we've built on our little wins. We've started with kind of the lacking, and we're building on our little wins to keep momentum going. So the Mind Your Language campaign has influenced the current CICC campaign to get young people's heard within placement matching. And through the impact of the original campaign, we've got really good working relationship with services throughout the trust that we need for this. So that's commissioning, fostering, and placements. So this again is a made up video by one of our young people, based on the content of the shared experience and the shared discussions, and they're thinking about the impact of recording, or not just right then, but when people get their files and later on in the future.
Hiya, just received the files that I requested. Do you know why I requested them? Okay, well, not long ago, I had a new social worker, and now I'm 17, I'm doing brilliantly, and I want to move into independence. I'm definitely ready for it. And, my new social worker put in a placement request for a really good flat in, like, a brilliant area, but it was refused. Why? Well, I'll tell you why. My new social worker, who doesn't know me, she only had my files to go on, so listen to this. Gemma was arrested for causing criminal damage and antisocial behaviour. This indicates an escalation of significant disruptive behaviour seen for the last 3 months. Gemma is unable to listen to authority and will consistently lash out verbally. You get the idea, but that is absolutely not me, and it actually really offends me that my old social worker gives no explanation whatsoever for my behaviour, especially when she knew what was going on at the time in my life. So, to basically translate what the passage says, I'd been in care for 3 months. I was 13. I had no idea what was going on with my parents. I'd just been taken from my home. I was angry. I was placed in a children's house. Of course I was angry. I smashed a window, but not on purpose. I just closed the door a little bit too fast, and the staff at the house called the police and I was arrested. I started swearing at them, obviously. But I paid for the window. I paid for the window. And now my new social worker told the owners of the flat that I'd been arrested for criminal damage, and so they won't have me. It was 4 years ago. I'm not that person anymore. So please don't just write the facts. Make it personal, give some context.
So off the back of that piece of work, we're now moving to a system of recording that encourages professionals to write to the young person. I know this is something that's happened in other local authorities as well, so I can't claim it just for Birmingham. So for instance, to give some context and to write to the young person. So for instance, in that situation, the social worker could have written something like, I came to visit you today, you were upset and angry. I think this is because you've had so much change. I want to try and talk to you more about this next time I see you to help you to understand. So it gives it context, and it also means that when that young person accesses their information later in life, it hopefully will make more sense to them. So the placements campaign is starting with a report by the young person about themselves. This includes all the general things or the normal things you see when somebody says what's the views of the child, so what they like to eat and do. But there's also a place for them to talk about anything negative in their past, to be able to give some context to what happened. Now, we know many placement moves happen at short notice. So there won't be enough time to do that piece of work right there and then. So what we're looking at is for that piece of work to be done and held on the young person's file for when it's needed. So the IRO service have agreed to include that in their questions at the CICC review. So just checking during the course and recording during the course of that review that piece of work is being done. And we've got agreement from commissioning and placements teams that they will work to ensure that this accompanies every placement request. Because again, we work in a system, and what we've got is providers saying, oh no, we can't do that. But it's as simple as having a system that allows an attachment, which a simple email does. So being able to get that information out there. So. Moving on from our Mind Your Language campaign. Sorry, has anyone got any questions about those 3 videos, or the messages that were behind them, or the way that they were done?
A couple of comments in the chat if you'd like me to share those.
Yeah, please.
So from the first video you shared, Patsy says, words are so important. It is so important to listen to the impact of words on people. Then following the second video about the situation the young person was describing, Holly says, I thought they'd been hanging out with his friends and someone had planted something on him, but then the friend changed their mind and he was worried about what could happen. Andrew says, Patsy's right, the words you use will tell people a lot about your attitudes, knowledge or understanding. Saying that last week he was in a meeting where someone who was very well intentioned kept talking about people suffering with learning disabilities. Yikes.
Andrew, can you, sorry Laura, did anyone challenge that? Did anyone feel, if you're able to, if you feel like sharing, did anyone kind of pick that up and make a kind of respectful challenge to that, or was it not the time and place?
Hi, it's me. I wrote the comment. No, they didn't. I think the first couple of times he said it, it was in the middle of a presentation and people were focused on that. I don't really think many people caught it.
Okay, yeah, and it's difficult to do when you're
raise, but it is someone we're in contact with, so I think it's something we'll have a gentle chat with him about it.
Yeah, because I would imagine that kind of a lot of professionals that we work with, they don't necessarily realise the impact of it. So we've not had much kickback, to be fair, with kind of just pointing things out to people. So yeah, that sounds that sounds a good way forward with that. Thanks, Andrew.
Okay, thank you.
Laura, were there some more?
Jay Green has got their hand up at the moment.
Okay.
Hiya, thank you, it's Jo.
Hiya.
Hiya, it's just a quick one. Bear with me because I've just got my voice back today. In regards,
have you got the non-COVID cold as well?
Yes. Thank you. Oh gosh. In regards to the third video, the young person that spoke about, you know, that it could be, well, highlighted, they can be quite traumatized and upsetting. I'm reading back your files. And I think that's a really good idea what you've put forward. But I guess my question was, what would the challenge look like? So for instance, if they had read something that they weren't happy with, what would then be the process to, you know, with the new process that you've put in place that you actually write to the young person, but what would be the process for them to change that, and what would that look like if they did want to change? Because sometimes that within itself can be quite challenging to get information changed. So what would that look like for that young person to do?
So you mean to go back and challenge what's been written historically?
Yeah, so I'm thinking you had spoke about the new process. So the way that would look is that you'd write to the young person, like I visited today and blah, 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 blah. But if they weren't happy with how that was written up, then how would they then be able to go about to change, what was written on that day?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So one of the things that we do through our advocacy service is we provide one-to-one advocacy to support young people through the complaint system, or hopefully to kind of mediate before it gets to an official complaint. So they could go through that official complaint procedure. But one of the things that we've seen is when complaints aren't successful, it is down to when one person says one thing and the recordings say something else. So challenging historical recordings is really, really difficult. So within the trust, we've got you know, off the top of my head, I don't know how many social workers we've got. So what we rely on to get new things through is very much the IRO service and heads of service and ADs and our practice hub who do the random pulls of case files to kind of do that challenge and get that message out there. But my understanding is it remains extremely difficult to challenge something. And so that's been recorded historically. So things like young people saying that they've been promised a contact before Christmas and it doesn't happen, and that's not in the recordings. That was something that we could. The young person was adamant. There was a member of staff from the residential home that said they'd heard it, and it was still incredibly difficult to challenge what had actually been written. So our hope is that by using the systems available to us, we can challenge them now. But I'm not convinced that there is a way of successfully challenging what was written historically. So that's not a great answer, but. And just thinking, just picking up on what Katie said there, it is very annoying that professionals have the ability to remember negative conversations almost verbatim, but recognising those strengths doesn't come doesn't come as easy. Jo, does that go any way to answering your question?
Yeah, it does answer my question. It's just that, you know, again, just bringing that to light, isn't it? Because especially if we're dealing with like where we are dealing with young people, just how difficult that can be to get that information changed, that's all. And I just wanted to know whether that new process brought anything to make that process a little bit easier for the young person, that was all. But it did answer the question, thank you.
Well, that's a piece of work that we're right at the beginning of doing. So we've had buy-in from our directors and our practice hub, and again the use of our IROs to kind of dip sample things as they come through. So hopefully in 2 years' time I'll be able to come back and give you a far better answer than that. Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you ever so much. I don't feel quite so alone now. I know you're all definitely out there. Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, Patsy's just said, what happened to you, instead of labelling behaviour. And I rewrote something the other day, taking all of the references to negative behaviour and rewording them as along the lines of having difficulty managing her strong emotions. And that came off the back of the mental health work that we did for the Corporate Parenting Board. So I'm just going to move on, and we'll come to some more questions later on. More than happy to do that. So moving on from our Mind Your Language campaign and thinking about the work of other groups, one way we've really been able to step up the changes we make is through careful use of the Corporate Parenting Board. So Young People ran a takeover board in March, which went incredibly well. And since this time, their presence on the board has been positively encouraged. So when we support young people to talk at the boards, we remember what works. So what young people say is based on the whole group's experience, but those that speak have experience that is current and relevant. So this clip I'm going to show you now is one of our members of our Young Parents Project, who are any care experience, either currently in care or as a care leaver, who has a child, whether that child is with them or not. So this is one of the members of our Young Parents Project at the Takeover Board, and she's talking about her experience prior to coming into care, being in care, and now as being a care leaver and a parent. And again, this is a shorter clip out of a longer piece.
I have lived my life in the care system, never having any positive role models. I feel professionals such as social workers often judged me. They forget to see the little child crying in me, wanting to be part of a family. I was spoken down to and quite often made to feel that I was to blame for my parents' mistakes. My parents should have taken good care of me. I have been left traumatised with the life I have had in care. I just want to be a great parent to my children, and with the help of professionals, instead of talking down to us, why not take a vested interest in us and help us keep our children? And this needs to be as early on as possible. I am currently working hard to get my children back. My children's social worker and I don't have a great relationship. She always makes me feel bad, that I am a bad parent. She makes me question myself, especially the way she talks to me. Please look at me as an individual with emotions and feelings. I am trying to get over the trauma my parents subjected to me. I can and will be a great parent with the help of the Young Parents Project. I feel, instead, that the named social worker making her judgment based on the past and the trauma I went through and using this against me, I feel that this should be approached in a more sensitive way, and that I should be looked at based on the person I am and not the person, a folder or a file, or what professionals have made me out to be. I feel that the communication between myself and the social worker should be somewhat more appropriate considering my own past difficulties.
Okay, so that's a young person speaking very eloquently there about how they've experienced being part of the whole system that surrounds our children. So, just for the record, we categorically do not tell our young people what to say. I would perhaps at times love a group which is quite compliant, but there is no way that we would ever get away with telling our young people what to say. So we don't write the script and we don't coach them. What we do is we help our young people reflect on their experiences, link their emotions into that, and then think about what could be done differently to make things better. So the clip starts with her describing her feelings, encouraging those who are watching to have that emotional link with her. She's honest about the impact of her experiences without sharing details and over disclosing. So you never find out what's happened to her, you never find out what's happened to her children, because the point is how the system has made her feel and how individual practice has made her feel, not the detail and the disclosure. She then gives clear practical things that can happen which would make her life better. So think about how my past will have affected. Think about how you talk to me. The relationship-based practice should be central to all of our interactions with children and young people within the trust. And however emotional, impactful or upsetting, you need to try and leave professionals with some hope about how to make things better. So the outcome of this piece, following the Corporate Parenting Board, is that so Birmingham split into 3 because we're so large. And I've had it described that one of our areas is about the size of an average other children's services in another local authority. So one of the area assistant directors for children in care now regularly meets with young parents to gain their views and improve the service given to parents who have been in care. So we talk a lot about corporate parenting and our corporate parenting responsibilities. So they come and try to learn how they can make that better. The other great win off of this one is 2 young parents now sit on the working group for the new regional pregnancy pathway. That's not a pathway about how to get pregnant, which is what I originally thought when I heard it. It's a perinatal pathway, as it's now been renamed. So this is led by Birmingham and Solihull NHS Clinical Care Group, and it's a multi-agency, it's a great big working group, which is redesigning the support given to parents pre and postnatally. So we've got two young people on that working group, on that panel, and their presence wasn't universally accepted, but they're now universally welcome, and their input and experience are greatly respected, because what you've got is a group of professionals who are designing something and talking through who needs to do what where, and you've got a young parent in the middle of that saying, actually, if you did it this way, it would be better. Well, I can tell you now that young people wouldn't do that in my experience. And again, when the young people speak, they're aware that they're speaking not just from their own experiences, but from the experience of everybody in the group when we've had those original discussions. And what happens is when they're part of a working group, they take that what's happening within that working group back to the main to the main group, and get feedback from them about kind of what they're happy with and any more suggestions. So although there's only 1 or 2 young people part of each working group going forward, there's that constant kind of check-in with the rest of the group. And many professionals on that working group have been converted to the idea of working with those with lived experiences because of those 2 young people on that board. So we followed this pattern of accessing senior leaders at the Corporate Parenting Board for our Care Leavers Forum, who are running a housing campaign. That's well on the way to improving post-17 housing process for our children in care. And again, that incorporates a multi-agency working group which has young people on it. And we've started a similar project with the mental health following last month's board. So I think, I think I've covered what's on that slide. So I've purposely not added anything to this slide, but I will tell you that this is a young man speaking on his own about his own views. So just have a watch, and then I'd kind of really like to get some feedback from you about what you think.
Hello, my name is Jan. and I am a member of a Children in Care Council Don't Disability group. We all had a discussion about the group name. I think Don't Disability is a clever name, because we shouldn't diss children and young people with special needs. We have more abilities than others. For example, being able to sign. We all agreed Don't Disability is a great name for the Children in Care Council. Bella said, "You need to see us, not our disability." David thought, "It is important not to be disrespectful." Melissa thinks, "It's a nice name." Molly said, "Don't Disability, we have so many abilities." Don't Disability Children in Care Council is a brilliant way to make friends and a great place to have fun. I am thankful to be part of it. Thank you for listening to me.
So anyone got any thoughts about that video that was again used as part of our corporate parenting board to introduce our new children with disability Children in Care Council? Yeah, we love the name too. Is anyone, sorry, I apologise, I can't see if anyone's got their hands up or wants to chip in about what their feeling was when they was listening to Leon speak. No? Okay. So my learning point for this slide is about the R factor. So this is the response that we get from some people, from lots of different professional backgrounds, but that "oh bless" kind of reaction when children who are young or children who have a disability stand up and tell them about their experiences. So as I say, we started the junior group and the Don't Disability group, who can also access our mainstream statutory Children in Care Council group. So we started those at the beginning of the year, and we also support Birmingham City Council's preparation for adulthood's participation group. And we get a lot of responses, which personally makes me cringe, and I think has the potential to undermine the messages that their children and young people are sharing. So these young people who really know their own minds, they have very powerful things to say, and they have the ability to influence huge positive change based on their own experiences. The young man in the video, Leon, he recently met with Ofsted. He shared his views on the care he receives. So he's very capable of speaking to people at a very high level. And our junior group are designing the content and format of the children's guide for our new family drug and alcohol team. Now, I don't really have any answers on this one, apart from that continuing theme. Patsy, I was hoping you were going to come up with an answer for me. So apart from that continuing theme of kind of respectful challenge, I don't have any answers for that, but I would really appreciate it if anyone's got anything that they know works. Please pop it in the chat, or we'll pause at the end of the presentation and you can share it then. So I've run through what works in getting children and young people's messages out, and now to look at the less positive side. Now, I'm a realist. I don't make the world. I just try and live in it, and for me, every day is a school day. So it's pretty well recognised that people who have experienced trauma overshare. One of my worst experiences with a participation group was when a non-trust professional who really should have known better came to the group and simply asked, "So what's it like being in care in Birmingham?" And the result of that was an hour of descriptions of bad experiences and abuse, one-upmanship. Actually my experience was worse than that, and the outcome was a group of very upset young people, and all actually for very little achieved. So don't get me wrong, we have very emotional sessions at times, but we structure in support during and after these sessions. So if we know it's going to be a particularly difficult one, we might have an extra member of staff, or if somebody leaves the room, somebody will go out with them, and we'll use our relationship with them to kind of see whether they just need a minute or just be available to them. And the same as when we have our online groups, if somebody dips out, somebody will be on the phone, giving them a text or a WhatsApp, just to check in with them and check that they're okay, because we do have a duty of care for them. So we are uncovering pain to look at what needs to change, and we focus on the changes that can happen at the end of the session as session time gets short. So if we're nearing the end of our time together and things are still very raw, and we're still talking about trauma, we're still talking about the pain, we will kind of try and move that situation on so that we end talking about what can change and what can happen to make things better. So point 2, if at all possible, know your young people and know your audience, which goes back to the kind of the experience that I just shared with the whole group. It was a professional that I didn't know at all, and it didn't go very well, as I've shared. So know your audience, even if they're more senior to you. So try to understand what the professional wants from their time with the group and what their experience in working with young people is. So likewise, I have had some challenges when working with young people who are new to our groups, the dynamics within the groups, and those joining presentations who are not existing members of our group who work with other areas of the trust. So one experience recently was a young person who works with a different team in the trust, came in particularly overshared and didn't leave professionals with any sense of hope or how they could help. And that recreates the wall that makes professionals not want to listen to young people in the future, and the opportunities and offers for young people to be involved kind of reduced down a bit. As a slight aside, we have had very little difficulty with young people actually at our groups. They're loud, they're opinionated, they disagree, but they write their own ground rules, and we encourage them to be self-policing. We work hard to bring young people back into the group after there's been an issue, even if that's been physical, as long as the young person shows understanding and remorse and the rest of the group are comfortable with that. We feel showing that young people can be accepted back and one mistake is not the end shares a very important message. And last but not least, point 3, you have 0 rights. So when the young people you work for talk, it's their space, period. Whether it be one of your regular group meetings, a visitor to your regular meetings, an internal training session, a corporate parenting board, an external regional or national workshop, or, as earlier, an Ofsted inspection. You can have an agenda, you can have a programme they've written themselves, a presentation they've done, but once they're given the space, it's their space. And if they want to ask questions, overshare, challenge individuals directly, then that's their right. I've had ongoing individual conversations with people who think that if young people are going to ask questions, particularly in a shared professional environment, say the corporate parenting board, that other professionals should know this in advance. The rationale for this is that the professional will then be able to give a much better and more informed response. So my feeling is that any professional who's paid a significant amount of money running a service should be able to know their service and be able to respond adequately to a question from a child. So my head of service and I discuss this when we run out of other things to argue about. We go back to this point about whether we should prep professionals. So you may need to stand your ground. So I put some key learning points up, points there for you. So it's for me, I don't think we'd achieve as much as we do if we didn't have a decent team. Start small, build momentum, make friends, use media like we've just done today with the videos and social media. When you're working with a group, use the whole group's experience to discuss their experience, link the emotions and identify changes. Make sure that those who present have the recent and relevant experiences so they can't be challenged. Share the impact of what their experience and not the private stuff. And last but not least, be brave because the children and young people need you. And then I'm more than open for questions. Thank you.